What's the worst thing a family member has said to you? My brother has always been on and off pills. But one time he was really out of it and didn't have a car. But wanted snacks. He demanded I go to the store to get him some. But I didn't want to. One thing led to another. We got in a fist fight and afterward he said he was gonna cut my throat in my sleep. I was 16, he was 22. At that point I'd probably just cut him out of my life forever tbh. Maybe call the police on him too. My mom admitted she loves my brother more than me. Let me tell you, that shit hurts. That I should thank her for not aborting me. That I shouldn't get my hopes up with my girlfriend because let's face it. I'm not that good looking and no one would ever love me. That fat or thin. No one wants me. Me too. I don't talk to either of my parents anymore. Because the abusive shit isn't worth it. It gets better. My uncle, that he'd block me from my grandmother's funeral because I didn't go and visit them one year for New Year's. I had been going to their place in Pennsylvania for well over a decade for New Year's. And thought I'd take a year off. Get a phone call from him threatening me randomly. And saying I'm an ungrateful young man. He claims not to remember this now. My dad had fun screaming back at him. Telling him he's a disrespectful piece of shit as well and to get a life, over me not coming that one year. Still remember that vividly to this day. And will never forget it. Bring it up once in a while when he asks when he's ever been hateful or disrespectful to me. My dad remembers and I do. Too. And usually denies him his right to willful ignorance. My uncle tells me on a regular basis I should hate my mom because she's a terrible person. Does he ever give any context? Yeah, but I don't like him so I try to ignore it. I said I hate you to my dad once when I was younger and it still tears me up thinking about how hurt he must have felt. I said that to my mom a couple of times growing up. It always hurt her but I always accepted it as something kids said when they couldn't control their feelings and just had a giant mass of anger they didn't understand. I always resolved to not take it seriously if my kids ever said it to me. Fully expecting them to. And they never have. I asked my grandmother-in-law to borrow something for the something blue wedding tradition. She said no because the item was too pretty for me and she was saving it for her adopted granddaughter. Oh. My mother's old thing. I'm saving it for Megan. It's too pretty for you. If it wasn't the day of the wedding, I personally would uninvited her. Wasn't to me but a sibling broke contact with my mother when my dad died, no reason given. 5 years later he comes waltzing back. Mom says you make me feel like you wish I had died instead of your father. He replied, yeah, you're right. He saw her about 6 times before she died 16 years later, but did show up for his inheritance. Mom was old school and wanted everything divided equally no matter what. He is broke now, less than 2 years later. For those interested he got $145,000. My father-in-law told my sister-in-law while they were in a big fight that he hoped she never could have kids. She was struggling to have kids and had a miscarriage and he knew that. My ex's dad hated her oldest brother and once forced him to go deer hunting. All while telling him that in the woods, accidents happen all the time. Her family was ducked. Uncle, looks like I win. We took bets on how long you'd last in college. I come from a very gambling addicted family. Dad, don't forget I've cut other children out of my life. Don't think I won't do the same to you. Mom, I really wanted another child but while I was pregnant you were roughhousing with me and landed on my stomach and I miscarried. You took away my chance. Grandmother, you'll never get a man if you're overweight. I'll pay for whatever diet you pick. Until then you're going on the cabbage soup diet. I was 15 and about 180 pounds. Other uncle, I don't know how two dumbass people had such a smart child. But you're just as ugly as them so I know you're theirs. And bonus 6 ed story from mom. Here's some mouthwash. You're gonna need it. It head of a father described in very graphic detail how he was going to kill himself and get my brother and I taken from my mom. Edit, wrong word. She never did it in graphic detail. But my mum would regularly say my brother and I ruined her life and threatened to kill herself. I know she was mentally ill, but her actions made us mentally ill too, so it's hard to be understanding. When I was 13, my mother found porn in our browser history. She flipped out. The line I remember most is, "You're going to hell where you belong." She also threatened to tell everyone at our church and in our town, and told me I would never be allowed to do anything but go to school and sleep ever again. I think she screamed at me for 2 or 3 hours in total. She calmed down a few days later, but it scared me off of interacting with the opposite sex for a very, very long time. Even now I have hang-ups about sexuality. When I was about 7 years old, I was diagnosed with dystonia, a neurological disease that caused my motor neurons to malfunction, resulting in the right side of my upper body being paralyzed. After a few months of going to the doctors and having tests done, all of which scared the hell out of me as a kid, I was sitting with my mom in our living room. My mother was the most loving and caring mother I could ever ask for. That's why what she said to me in our living room broke my heart. She said, "I don't want a special kid." I went to my room crying that night because it felt like she was blaming me for something that I couldn't even control or change. I was already depressed because of my condition and how it affected my performance at school. But now it felt like the universe was kicking me while I was down. NSFL. This is all your fault. I don't want to be doing this, but you're making me. Look at how disgusting you are. When I got an erection because grandpa was jerking me off. This lasted up until I was 8. But I'm in therapy now and doing much better. If you ever want a nose job. I was 12. It was my grandma. How old was grandma? Just wondering. It feels like a certain pocket of elderly are stuck in the 1950s with their thinking and obsession with weight and looks. When I was growing up, I spent nearly every day with my grandparents while my parents were working. 5 days a week. For a good chunk of the day. 4 years. I came out as gay when I was 17. My grandparents disowned me. My grandfather told me that AIDS is God's punishment for homosexuality. And I was blamed by my grandmother for my grandfather's 30 pounds weight loss because of the stress I caused them. The last words my grandparents ever said to me was in a letter. The last line of the letter still sticks with me. "Don't you see how much you've hurt us?" I tried telling my mother about my suicidal thoughts. I didn't outright say it and started dancing around the topic, so she figured I was just itching about school again. Enjoy life now. It's just going to get harder was definitely not what I needed to hear at that moment. You better not be, my mom, after I told her I was pregnant at age 29 with my husband of 8 years. When I told her we were very happy, especially after having had a miscarriage, and that the baby was a gift from God, she replied, "See if you can send it back." It wasn't to me or even about me, which is what made it so shitty. When my mother died, it quickly became apparent who in the family accepted and recognized responsibility. No one. I did the dirty work, obituary written, cremation organized, arranging the cremains to be moved from one state to another, funeral home for a service, prayer cards, priest, even a slideshow with photos of her that I collected thanks to some of her friends and an uncle, and a bunch of songs that I picked out. Only one was on her living will. So, that's a lot in the above. It took place over the course of a month where I also was going to work full time. It sucked. So the thing said was by my brother at the service, about a month after my mother died. And I hadn't heard a damned peep from my brother at all. He was talking to some co-workers and said something along the lines of "Thanks. We all worked really hard on it." I was so hurt. They all left me to deal with a mess and congratulated themselves for what? Choosing the poem on the prayer card? I haven't spoken to them in years. Your grandpa started getting schizophrenia around 25. Out of all of the kids, I think you're the one most likely to get it too. Thanks, Mom. but shitty prediction skills. That I didn't love my dad enough and that's why he died. My grandmother said it. I was 11 years old. He had a brain tumor. You're so annoying, I want to grab you by your head and slam it into the dashboard. This is why you'll never find a husband. If I could, I would just leave and never see you again. From my dad. Tried to tell my mum about my agoraphobia, social anxiety and other assorted issues. Was 15 years old and failing high school, and she called me a liar and said I was just a millstone around her neck that is dead weight. Fast forward a few years and I live with my dad and haven't gone outside in at least 6 months, thanks mum. When I was younger, my dad was pretty much verbally abusive. He was great most of the time. But when he got in a mood or when you upset him, I grew up believing that I was an idiot, a moron, a ducking piece of shit, etc. I've had a lot of self-worth and anxiety problems because of that. And a damn rough time with depression. Except growing up I couldn't seek help from my parents for that because my dad was very vehement about his opinion that depression is just whiny losers who can't deal with life, so they make up drama and feel bad, so they cry that they want to die, which is just attention seeking. How ducking stupid do these kids these days have to be to think they'd want to die? Do these morons not realize that once you're dead and that's it? You don't get a redo. Depression isn't real. People just make a fuss because they don't want to deal with life when they have it easier than anyone else before them. We only had you because we lost the child we wanted. Wow. That's just really awful. I'm so sorry. The first words out of my mom's mouth after I came out of the closet to her: don't tell your father because it will put a strain on our marriage and we'll end up getting a divorce. Thanks mom. Super. This was hard enough. Rockstar parenting. I hope you get hit by a bus, because that'll be the only way you'd survive Armageddon, mom. Are the joys of religion sometimes. Which is funny because she isn't active at all either, lol. And the few times I apparently look like a hooker prostitute for wearing short shorts and have big bobs. Woo. I hope you're happy he died. My grandma on my biological father's side talking about his death. He died due to heart complications and I never got to meet and ask him why he denied I was his the moment I was born. She said this just after his memorial service. I hate that itch and most of that family, to be honest. My stepdad is my father. In the words of Yondu, he may have been your father but he wasn't your daddy. That I'm useless. It's not his fault for assaulting you. That's what all teenage boys do, my parents. Edit, they apologized for it. Still hurt at the time though. Had a mental breakdown in front of mum's friend. Not something I could control. She asks for an apology a few days later because I embarrassed her. When I was 16, my mom told me the only thing you know how to do is cry. I cry when I'm upset or angry because it's the only way I can release my emotions. I felt worthless for years afterwards. You're like your dad, uncle. My dad was abusive and my mum hated her uncle for years. I liked my uncle but the hate was justified, tbh. I shouldn't have made you. You made my life miserable and you don't deserve a penny. Girl, I'm paying for my college and bills because of my grades, so don't tell me that the only problem I have is getting bullied. I have to maintain a grade. Also victim blaming me when I got bullied because I was weak and I always cry. So I was the reason I got bullied. Yep. I wanted to be a chef really bad. Response: what girl put that thought into your mind? You're doing computers since you're good at it. Thing is, I really loved cooking and creating things that could be fun to eat. I told my parents I have a girlfriend. I'm a girl as well. And dad said, I'm ashamed of you and you will never call me dad again. Also, he asked me later how I still had the guts to visit home. Mom is not an asshole and still says she loves me, though doesn't understand. My sister was going through meth addict and we found 6 tape. My brother is just hanging out with friends. Smoking, drinking. Failing classes. Me, the youngest, was studying. Being the top student. Getting 4.0 GPA from uni not making my parents sad like my siblings. But of course I had problems of my own that I'm dealing with. I have trouble keeping in touch with people. With my mom. Rarely call her. She was sad that I rarely call her and said to me, out of all my child, you are the most disappointing. It hurts, but she had depression then, so it's her depression talking. But yay. That sucks.